They never talked about this when we were younger, not in school, not at the dinner table, and certainly not among friends. It was the kind of thing you were expected to figure out on your own, quietly, secretly, maybe even shamefully. But here we are, decades later, looking back with clearer eyes and softer hearts, realizing that what we didn't say might have mattered most. This video isn't about shame. It's about understanding. It's about looking back so we can move forward with dignity, wisdom, and a bit of humor. Because truthfully, there are things many older men wish they'd known about masturbation. Simple truths that could have made life healthier, relationships deeper, and aging a little kinder. Whether you're 60, 70, or well into your 80s, this is for you. It's for the man who's been through battles, physical, emotional, and spiritual, and still wonders if it's okay to want closeness, even if it's just with himself. It's for the one who grew up in silence and was never told that touch can be healing, not dirty. And it's for the brave soul willing to look within and say, maybe it's time I rethink what I thought I knew. These 5 life lessons aren't just about the body. They're about the soul, the heart, and the quiet moments that remind us we're still here, still worthy, still learning. So let's begin with gentleness, with honesty, and with the kind of talk many of us wish we'd had when we were younger men. This isn't just about sex. It's about self-respect, health, connection, and what it means to come home to yourself at last. Secret 1. It's not just about release. It's about connection. For most of his life, Harold thought of masturbation as nothing more than a quick release. A tension reliever, something to get over with, not something to reflect on. He was 72 when that changed. A widower for over a decade, he'd grown used to the silence in his home. The television filled some of it, the garden filled the rest. But there were nights when the quiet became something heavier, loneliness. Not just the absence of another person, but the absence of closeness, even with himself. One night, Harold sat alone in his favorite chair, the same one his wife used to curl up in with a book. He realized he hadn't touched himself in months, not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't feel connected, felt meaningless. He missed tenderness. So that night, for the first time in his life, he approached his body not like a machine, but like an old friend he hadn't seen in years. Slowly, kindly, not rushing toward climax, but sitting with the moment, with the memories, with the feelings. That was the night Harold learned something men rarely talk about. That self-pleasure can be intimate, emotional, healing. You see, it's not just about biology. It's about connection to your own body, your history, your longing. It's about acknowledging that you still feel, that you still need, that your body still deserves attention, even after decades of wear and tear. Many older men confess later in life that they spent years separating touch from emotion. They were never taught it could be more than just friction. But once you allow yourself to slow down, to be present with your body, you open a door to something deeper. Peace, comfort, and even grief that can finally breathe. The secret, the simple, masturbation, when done with presence, isn't just a release. It's a return to yourself. And for many men, especially those in their later years, that kind of connection can be more powerful than anything they ever experienced in their youth. Secret 2. Frequency doesn't define your masculinity. Frank was 68 when he finally admitted something out loud that he'd carried in silence for years. He didn't feel like a real man anymore. Not since his sex drive began to slow down. Not since he went from a few times a week to maybe once a month. Sometimes less. In his younger years, he tied his worth as a man to how often he could perform, whether with a partner or alone. That number in his head, it haunted him like a scoreboard, constantly measuring, constantly judging. And he's not alone. So many older men fall into this trap. We grow up with these silent rules, that a man should be ready anytime, that desire should be constant, that slowing down means something is wrong. But it's a lie we believed for far too long. Frank learned this the hard way. He went through a stretch where his body just didn't respond the way it used to. And instead of compassion, he gave himself criticism. Instead of patience, he gave himself pressure. He tried pills, he tried pretending. Nothing worked. And that's when the shame crept in. The quiet kind that doesn't speak but is always there. It wasn't until he met a therapist, someone who specialized in men's health, that he heard the words that changed everything. You are not broken. You are evolving. Because masculinity isn't a number. It's not defined by how often you feel desire or how many times you act on it. It's defined by how deeply you know yourself, how gently you treat your body, how honestly you live. The truth is, frequency will change. Supposed to. Bodies age, hormones shift, but none of that takes away your worth. None of that makes you less of a man. The real lesson here? Your masculinity doesn't live in your pants. It lives in your presence, in your integrity, in how you care for yourself when no one's watching. So let go of the scoreboard. Let go of the pressure. You are not less because you do less. You are more because you've learned what truly matters. Secret 3. Shame is a thief of joy and health. George was 81 when he told his grandson something he'd never said aloud in his entire life. He leaned back in his old recliner, looked out the window and said softly, "I grew up thinking my body was something to be hidden, something to be ashamed of, and I paid for that thinking every day." As a boy in the 1950s, George was taught that touching yourself was dirty, sinful, even. The mere thought of pleasure was followed by fear. Fear of punishment, of guilt, of being seen as weak or immoral. So, he did what many boys did back then. He buried the instinct. He pushed it down. And with it, he buried his ability to feel truly at home in his own skin. For decades, he lived with a quiet shame. He married, had children, provided for his family. But in the privacy of his own mind, he never felt free. His body was something he used, not something he appreciated. Pleasure was hurried. Intimacy was a duty. And the shame? It sat in the corners, stealing joy in ways he didn't even realize until he was much older. It wasn't until his late 70s, after his wife passed, after the house was quiet, that George began to question what he'd always believed. He started reading, listening, talking to other older men who shared the same regrets. They had spent a lifetime punishing themselves for being human. Shame, he realized, wasn't just an emotion. It was a thief. It had robbed him of peace, of ease, of the kind of joy that comes when you accept your body without judgment. Here's the truth many older men finally come to see. There is nothing dirty about knowing yourself. There is nothing shameful about pleasure. What is shameful is how long it took society to say so. Letting go of shame isn't easy. It takes unlearning, takes compassion. But it's worth it because on the other side of shame is freedom. And it's never too late to find that freedom. Your body isn't your enemy. It's your oldest companion. And it's time you treated it with the kindness it always deserved. Secret 4. It's a form of preventive health. When Leonard turned 76, his doctor gave him advice he never expected to hear. Keep the blood flowing, even down there. It's good for your prostate and your heart. Leonard blinked in surprise. All his life, he thought of self-pleasure as something youthful, something you left behind as the years caught up. But here was a medical professional telling him that not only was it normal, it was healthy. That moment changed everything. You see, for decades, older men were told that aging meant decline, that desire fades, and the body simply stops responding. But modern science says otherwise. In fact, regular, gentle sexual activity, including solo activity, has been shown to support circulation, reduce stress, help with sleep, and even boost mood. It's not just about pleasure, it's about prevention. Leonard had struggled with sleep for years. He felt stiff, restless, and anxious at night. But when he started reconnecting with his body, not forcefully, not obsessively, but intentionally, he noticed something. His nights became calmer, his mind less noisy, and he began to feel, in small but meaningful ways, alive again. There's even more. Gentle self-stimulation can support prostate health by encouraging fluid movement and reducing inflammation risks. It helps keep pelvic floor muscles active, which plays a role in bladder control and core strength. And perhaps most powerfully, it reminds the brain that this body, this aging vessel, still works, still matters, still feels. For men who may struggle with erectile issues or health limitations, it's not about performance, it's about presence. A quiet way to say to yourself, I still belong here, in this body, in this life. So here's the truth. Masturbation isn't something to outgrow. It's something to understand, deeply, respectfully, and with new eyes. In your 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond, this practice can be a kind of medicine, gentle, private, and empowering. Your health isn't just in your heart or your blood pressure numbers. It's in your comfort with yourself, in your willingness to stay in touch, literally and emotionally, with your own well-being. And sometimes, healing starts with a simple, familiar gesture. One that reminds you you're still here, you're still whole, you're still worth caring for. Secret 5. Intimacy with yourself helps intimacy with others. Thomas had been married twice, lost one to cancer, lost the second to silence. In both relationships, he'd been present, physically, financially, but never fully open. He cared deeply, but vulnerability? That was a language he never learned. It wasn't until he turned 74, living alone in a small apartment filled with old records and family photographs, that he began to understand something profound. Intimacy with another person begins with intimacy with yourself. For most of his life, Thomas thought self-pleasure was just a private act, something to keep hidden, separate from the deeper parts of his emotional world. But age has a way of stripping things down to the truth. He began to notice that he'd never truly explored what he enjoyed, what made him feel connected. He realized he had spent a lifetime focused on performance, on giving, on pleasing, without ever asking what he needed. So he started small, slowing down, listening to his body without judgment. Not just touching, but noticing his breath, his heartbeat, his tension, his memories. And slowly, something unexpected happened. He softened. That same gentleness he began to offer himself started to spill into other areas of his life. His conversations with friends became more open. He reconnected with an old flame, this time with more honesty and less fear. He began to understand that true intimacy isn't just about bodies touching. It's about being seen, even when you're alone. So many older men never learned how to be vulnerable. They confuse it with weakness, but vulnerability is strength. It's the foundation of love, of healing, of connection. When you learn to be comfortable with yourself, in your solitude, in your stillness, in your own skin, you become capable of a deeper intimacy with others. You listen more, you judge less, you hold space for someone else because you've learned to hold space for yourself. The truth is, intimacy doesn't begin in the bedroom. It begins in how you treat yourself when no one is watching, in the tenderness you allow, in the silence you stop fearing. And when you build that relationship within, you open the door to something far more meaningful outside. So here we are, 5 lessons born not from textbooks or locker room talk, but from lived experience, from the quiet reflections of older men who've walked the long road of life, often in silence, often in shame, but who now speak with honesty, courage, and clarity. We began this journey by saying this wasn't just about sex, and it's not. It's about the lifelong relationship you have with your own body, your own heart, your sense of worth as a man, not defined by performance, not determined by frequency, but by presence and peace. You've heard from men who learned, often too late, that self-pleasure can be a form of connection, not just release. That your masculinity isn't measured by how often you can, but by how well you understand yourself. That shame is not something you were born with, it was taught to you, and it can be unlearned. You've heard that masturbation, in its most honest and mindful form, is not indulgence. It's healthcare, it's self-respect, and you've learned that the more we open up to ourselves, the more we can open up to those we love. These are not small realizations. They are milestones, moments of awakening that can change the last chapters of your life in powerful, liberating ways. So if you take anything with you from this video, let it be this: it's never too late to begin again. To see your body not as something fading, but as something sacred. To reclaim intimacy, not just with others, but with yourself. To let go of old beliefs that no longer serve you, and to walk into the years ahead with more softness, more strength, and far more self-love. If this message resonated with you, or reminded you of something you've carried quietly for too long, please take a moment to leave a comment. Share your thoughts, your questions, or even your story. There's power in speaking up. You might be surprised how many men are walking the same road. And if you know someone, a friend, a brother, a father, who might need to hear this, send it their way. You could be the bridge to their healing. Subscribe for more honest conversations, real stories, and the kind of wisdom that only life and time can give. You're not alone. You're not broken. You're becoming. And we're honored to walk this journey with you.